panelists, brothers and sisters. Let me begin by acknowledging how great an honor it is for the WCC to be part of this event. Today, December 10th, 2018, marks the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The day in 1948, when the newly created General Assembly of the United Nations adopted the first global proclamation of the inalienable human rights to which all persons should be entitled. The World Council of Churches, the WCC, also celebrates its 70th anniversary this year. And Pope Francis visited us in June to mark this occasion. The WCC participated in the drafting of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, in particular through contributing to the text in Article 18 on freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Over the last 70 years, the WCC has remained active in advocating for the implementation of both the Declaration as well as the body of international human rights law, which has been developed in the ensuing years. Therefore, there is more than coincidence in these anniversaries and in the theme of our consultation today. After years of war, even world wars, the churches in the world gathered to commit themselves to a joint agenda for unity based on justice and peace. Never again was also the word from the churches. For that to be true, strong means to promote justice, peace, and accountability in the world was needed. Declarations and commitments to human rights, caring for all human beings created with the same dignity in the image of God was one. However, education that could lead to understanding of history, of different cultures and religions, promoting shared values and an ethos of peace was another significant agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, we need this today as well, more than ever. Today, it is important to reflect on the progress made in 70 years. War crimes and crimes against humanity can now be prosecuted following the creation of international tribunals and the establishment of the Human Rights Council and its monitoring mechanisms, the Universal Periodic Review, all of which have increased the transparency of human rights accountability. Rights to development were given a boost by the Millennium Development Goals and their successor, the Sustainable Development Goals, resulting in a decline in preventable infant mortality and great improvements towards gender equality in education. Yet, the gains and progress we have achieved in 70 years remain fragile. As both the WCC and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights mark 70 years, we also acknowledge that the aspiration of equality, that the rights of the Declaration be applied to all members of the human family, and that there were equal rights of men and women, is still far from being realized. For the WCC itself, it is only after 40 years of hard work and leadership by women as well as men in the decade of the churches in solidarity with women that this move towards equality was launched in 1988. For the global community, we are reminded in the Sustainable Development Goals that gender equality in all sections is still far from being reached. This is nowhere more apparent than in the levels of violence and abuse perpetrated against women and girls. The deafening conspiracy of silence around sexual and gender-based violence is one of the most serious obstacles to the vision of a just community. We know that it is a reality everywhere. The 2018 Nobel Peace Prize, awarded to Denis Mukwege and Nadia Murad, is an important and long overdue, high-profile acknowledgement of the extent to which sexual violence is used as a weapon of war. Such an award is an encouragement for all to do more to end sexual violence in war and conflict. But we are also called to extend the end to gender-based violence at all levels. How do we overcome the persistent, stubborn realities of prejudice and discrimination based on gender or race or ethnicity, sexual orientation, or class today? Ultimately, such change requires a deep transformation of values. Religion remains the single most influential factors in the values of most people around the world. To nurture change at the deepest level, therefore, we believe we must enlist the power of religion and religious commitment in the service of human dignity and human rights. One concrete example of how this change can happen is through interreligious education for peace. The question of how faith communities can educate for peace in a world torn by war and conflict is most pressing in today's world. It is imperative that leaders of religious communities of various kinds recognize that one of the most solemn tasks laid upon them is to pass on a vision for the pursuit of peace to those they lead, those they teach, those whose imaginations they help shape, and whose consciences they help to form. Faith communities, as communities of edification at various levels, formal, informal, religious, and secular, have a definite role in this. What are the motivations and means for us to capitalize on the constant opportunities for religious communities to teach their members how to be peacemakers? As Christians, we seek peace and we educate our people to seek peace because to do so is a clear expression of our obedience to the call of Christ to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. One of the many manifestations of this love-motivated activity of Christians in and for the sake of the wider world is to seek peace. Inclusivity is one of the most important principles to reshape education today. For Christians, the theological foundation that human beings are created in the image and likeness of God is at the core of this principle of inclusivity and should therefore shape educational methodologies and practice. Flowing from this principle are two practical implications, namely to make education accessible as well as affirmative. Education today needs to become an inclusive process, affirming especially the roles of women and children. It is important that opportunities for education are not limited on the basis of gender. Education for peace should also have an affirmative dimension where one's perception and understanding of the other should lead to mutual flourishing. A positive vision of human beings who are different from us in ethnicity or religion needs to be nurtured. In contexts where a majority religious community controls the education system, any inadequate and inaccurate representations of the other needs to be avoided in order to avoid distorted attitudes towards the religious others. The World Council of Churches, in collaboration with the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, has worked on a document on education for peace in a multireligious world. We emphasize together that educational systems need to offer opportunities for encouraging the plurality of society and for enabling effective encounter among different groups and communities. As part of an interreligious contribution to education for peace, there are some efforts that communities of faith can undertake together, which I'd like to place before us. Implementing effective models of education for peace at the local level are significant as part of the process of building inclusive communities. Joint efforts among various religious communities can also include developing educational resources and curricula that focus not only on the promotion of knowledge, but also on developing skills along with the goodwill to translate them into concrete action and behavioral practice. Faith communities need to work toward enhancing the capacity for behavioral change based on a genuine respect for the dignity of all human beings. At the institutional level, there is need for faith communities to challenge governments to shape education as a means towards strengthening fundamental human rights and safeguarding the dignity of all, dispelling injustice and discrimination, respecting legitimate differences, and enabling greater openness to others. In this and other arenas where human dignity and human rights are at stake, the WCC is committed to raise its voice for justice and peace, and to support the churches in their efforts towards education for peace. We constantly try to be in the shoes of the other, to see what protection and peace we all need. In the year of the 70th anniversary of both the WCC and the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, the Central Committee of the WCC, which met recently in Geneva from the 15th to the 21st of June, adopted the following affirmations. Namely, to strongly reaffirm the commitment of the WCC to the principles of human dignity and human rights, and to the commitments expressed in international human rights law as codified in the UDHR and the family of international human rights treaties. To reassert that international human rights law is an essential framework for the promotion, protection, and practical recognition of the God-given human dignity of every human being. And to call on the WCC member churches and ecumenical partners to reprioritize human rights and active support for the legal instruments of international human rights law as a bulwark against injustice, oppression, occupation, and tyranny. In the language of our faith, it is a journey, a pilgrimage towards justice and peace that we must take, and also a time of transformation towards more justice and more peace in all our communities. 70 years on, in action and advocacy, education and service, the WCC remains committed to affirming and upholding the dignity of every person, and to working with other member churches, ecumenical partners, the United Nations and its agencies, and all people of goodwill to implement the ideals of the Universal Declaration. In this, let us work together for a future with human rights for all and as one humanity. Thank you.